Hello, everyone. Welcome to Leisrealtalk. Happy Sunday. Oops, let me make sure my audio is set up correctly. Hold on. Okay, this microphone sounds better. All right. Okay, let's get started. How's everyone? How's your Sunday so far? Good? Excellent. Okay, let's get started because we have a great program ahead of us. You know, as the saying goes, when you gaze long into the abyss also gazes back at you. December 1st was World AIDS Day. There has been widespread panic on Chinese social media regarding HIV, AIDS, with the majority of cases linked to unhealthy sexual behavior. Men and women in China have been discussing self-respect and staying away from promiscuity due to concerns of HIV. So today I'll first discuss how China's HIV problem has particularly impacted the elderly and young people. Then we'll examine the scale of China's HIV problem, as the official data cannot be trusted. To do this, we must revisit China's AIDS outbreak of the 1990s and understand the data. And unlike the outbreak of in other countries, the Chinese react to HIV more strongly. In the end, I'll discuss the impact of HIV on Chinese people's behavior. So first things first, the official Chinese data has put total number of HIV patients right now to be at 1.3 million. Actually, here's the chart. And this graph, let me back up a minute. 1.3 million, that's over the United States, 1.2 million total. And so this number makes China now the largest HIV country outside Africa. So here are the regions color-coded with their prevalence. Sichuan is the worst hit province, followed by Guangxi, Chongqing, Yunnan, and Guizhou. Actually, I have listed the provinces for you. And, well, of course, these are the official data, which isn't totally reliable. People say Beijing and Shanghai should be pretty bad, but the official data doesn't support that claim. And it probably is related to the fact that the officials don't want to show Beijing and Shanghai to have such a problem of HIV. Research shows that over the past 20 years, China's HIV/AIDS prevalence rate has continued to rise. The prevalence rate of reported HIV cases increased 85 times from 1.09 case per 100,000 people in 2002 to now 79, almost 80 cases per 100,000 in 2021. And according to the latest data from the Chinese CDC in 2022, there were 107,000 new cases reported nationwide, and almost 98% of them were sexually transmitted, of which 72% through heterosexual contact and 26% through male-to-male sexual contact. So what these data means is that the HIV epidemic has already impacted, it means that the majority of the transmissions are among heterosexual couples, meaning that HIV has affected the general public. And most strikingly, Chinese elderly demographics and young people are the most affected. So let's talk about the elderlies first. This is a screenshot from the Beijing government, the municipal government's website. So the Beijing municipal government posted this on its website in 2020. And it's titled, Why More and More Elderly People Got HIV? And the answer is, according to the post, high-risk sexual behavior coupled with the lack of awareness and the lack of protection. So according to China's official data, between 2015 and 2022, there were almost 222,000 reported cases of HIV among individuals aged 60 and above. The number of new cases reported each year increased from 17,000 to 27,000 during that period, with the new diagnosis rate rising from 9 per 100,000 people to 10.2 per 100,000. And this rate is about twice the rate in the US and 3 times the rate in Europe. Among the infected, the number of male elderly is approximately 3 times that of female elderly. The majority of the infected have lower educational levels, with farmers making up 70.4% of the total. Chinese researchers noted that the analysis largely depends on case report data rather than actual case data. And only less than 1/5 of elderly individuals seek HIV testing, with more cases not being discovered. And in one of my earlier programs this month, I discussed China's urban elderly enjoying a lucrative pension, and their financial affluence is envied by the young people. And many of the urban elderly people are sexually very active. Remember, in November, there was a tragic in Zhuhai at a sports facility where an angry man drove a SUV and rammed through a crowd exercising at the place. It was said that the man's wife, who was in her 50s, was having affairs with several men, and one of them was a retired official. So not just urban elderlies are sexually active, the poor men in rural China are active too. Their high incidence of HIV is related to their hobby of visiting brothels and not using any protective measures. However, what concerns people the most, let me come back. What concerns people the most, however, is HIV infection rate, or the growth of HIV infection rate among young people. Wu Zunyou, a former official at the Chinese CDC, once stated that between 2011 and 2015, the annual growth rate of HIV infection among young students was 35%. According to officials from the Disease Control and Prevention Center, in 2022, new reported cases of HIV/AIDS among young people aged 15 to 24 grew more than 3 times than the previous year, from 3,000 new cases in 2021 to 10,700 cases in 2022. And let me share you with a screen. Where did that go? And this doctor from a hospital in Zhengzhou, Henan, said in a recent video that not just college students, high school and junior high school students came to hospitals alone to test for HIV, and were crying, afterwards once the result came out positive, and their parents couldn't believe that their children could have HIV. And this doctor's advice to parents were, don't just focus on your children's academic work. Give them the right value, teach them the right behavior, including sexual behavior. Now, in 2014, Henan province Henan province was the first in China that required college students to undergo HIV test before college admission. Now, all colleges in China, I believe, administer HIV tests on their students. In 2016, some universities in Sichuan sold HIV test kits, urine test kits in vending machines. And then this practice was followed by Shanghai. Let me show you. I actually have a picture of this. Yeah, these are the pictures of the vending machines. And at one university in Shanghai, the test kits sold out in just 6 hours. And what's terrifying is that out of the 37 tests that were collected, 2 were positive and 3 samples were defective and couldn't be tested. So what are the chances of that? It's equivalent to 1 in 17 people being infected with HIV. And in Beijing, several universities also sold HIV test kits. And according to Beijing Youth Daily, some of them sold out in less than 3 days. Chinese surveys showed that about 60 to 80% of university students engage in sexual activities and have multiple sexual partners. However, the short-lived satisfaction from reckless sexual behavior cannot fill the emptiness of the body and the soul. Chinese elderly and youth have consistently high depression rate and suicide rates. But their behavior has opened Pandora's box. The spread of sexually transmitted diseases like HIV and syphilis is causing public panic. So let me play you a video showing the amount of young people queuing up outside a HIV clinic. Where is that video? Here we go. I think this is the video. Yeah, here we go. So yeah, this is in Shenzhen, and it shows the people outside, and I will show you the people inside. And then you will see a young woman yelling and punching at her husband for giving her. Here we go. Oh my goodness, this is too loud. This woman was upset at her husband for giving her STD. We don't know if it's HIV, but this is what the video says. So seeing how people panic, right? You wonder how many people actually have HIV in China. Is it the officially stated 1.3 million? So now let's go to the next subject, which is how many people do we think have HIV in China? We know we can't trust the CCP's official data. The actual number is much higher. This is because China had an AIDS outbreak in the 1990s, and its impact has been underreported. Let's first revisit that piece of history. So in 1992, Henan provincial government advocated a blood-for-profit approach for economic development, claiming that with 70 million people eligible to sell blood out of the province's 90 million population, it could generate 100 million yuan revenue annually if just 1 to 2% sold blood. Blood stations, both legal and illegal, sprung up across the province, and the government and military both ran blood banks for profit. To save costs, blood centers skipped testing for contagious diseases such as hepatitis C or B and HIV before collecting blood. Some blood stations operated with minimal equipment and collected blood in rural areas for cash, in exchange for cash. Under the slogan, "Not selling blood is unpatriotic," 1.4 million farmers in Henan, including elderly people who dyed their hair black to appear younger, participated in this blood-for-profit movement. sometimes with crowds of up to 1,000 people waiting for their turn. For each blood donation, they earned 50 yuan, which is about $6 at a time. After collection, the plasma is separated and sold to pharmaceutical companies. The remaining blood components from donors or from sellers of the same blood type were mixed and reinfused back into them, who paid 5 yuan for receiving the reinfusion. This caused severe cross-contamination and widespread HIV transmission. Eventually, the state council shut down the blood centers. However, it wasn't until 2000, when HIV/AIDS spread rapidly in China, that CCP officials were forced to acknowledge the epidemic. To this day, the CCP continues to cover up the truth about the Henan blood scandal and have persecuted doctors who spoke up. According to Henan provincial government, between 1992 and 1995, at least 1.4 million people in the province sold blood. At the time, the HIV infection rate among blood sellers were between 50 to 70% in the province. So assuming a 50% infection rate, we would at least see 700,000 blood sellers infected during that period. And this doesn't include those who contracted HIV through contaminated blood products, or those who got HIV from HIV-positive blood sellers, such as their spouses and their girlfriends and boyfriends. And Henan wasn't the only province that operated blood selling centers. On September 3rd, 2003, the human rights organization Human Rights Watch released a report on China's HIV/AIDS situation. It stated that HIV was spread through blood stations operated by the Chinese government in at least 7 provinces, with a total population of 400 million. The infection rate among blood sellers in these provinces ranged from 4% to 40%. The organization believes that the number of HIV/AIDS victims in China far exceeds the official government estimate of 1 million. So, how many people were actually infected with HIV? Well, there are only two Chinese women, who, in my opinion, are the most qualified to answer this question. These 2 women risked everything they had to get to the bottom of this question. The first woman is Dr. Wang Shuping. Where is she? Oh, sorry, I have to go back to this. There she is. She was working at a biotesting center in Zhoukou, in the Zhoukou area of Henan. She was the first woman, or the first person, who discovered the HIV outbreak and was adamant in reporting it to the central government. As a result, she was persecuted. She was beaten by local officials in Henan. Her lab was forced to be closed, and her husband also divorced her. She left China and settled down in Utah. Dr. Wang made an assessment of the HIV epidemic. In 1995, while she was in Henan, she collected plasma samples for testing, and the results showed that HIV antibody rate was around 13%. At that time, Henan had around 400 blood stations or centers, and there were approximately 10,000 of them nationwide. Each blood station served around 10,000 blood sellers. So the total number of people involved in selling blood nationwide could reach 100 million. So conservatively, let's conservatively put it at half capacity. There were about 50 million Chinese who donated or who sold blood at the time. And with a 10% infection rate, Dr. Wang estimated that approximately 5 million Chinese contracted HIV through selling blood in the 1990s. Now, keep in mind, this figure does not include those infected through the contaminated blood products and those who had sexual or intimate contacts with the blood sellers. Another woman is Dr. Gao Yaojie, who is famous in the West. She was a retired gynecologist who did research on the AIDS epidemic in Henan. She also supported the villagers who contracted the disease from selling blood. She stated in 2013 that while many people were aware of the AIDS outbreak in Henan, they are unaware of the many unidentified HIV carriers in other parts of China. She said there are many infected people who are unaware of it, hiding in the vast population and becoming little-known sources of transmission. Dr. Gao believed it was difficult to estimate due to the CCP's full-scale cover-up, making it impossible to conduct accurate statistics. But she believes that Dr. Wang's estimate was close to reality. And she said that over the past decade, the number of HIV/AIDS cases from blood transfusions has increased dramatically and spread across China, far outpacing the number of blood sellers by a factor of 10. So the number of infected individuals and death should have now surpassed tens of millions. By the way, Dr. Gao also escaped China. She left China at the age of 84 and lived in New York. She passed away at the age of 95, I think it was 2 years ago. By the way, Dr. Wang also passed away. So here are the numbers. I mean, we don't have any other numbers. These are the two experts who have firsthand knowledge of the outbreak in China, and this is their work based on their best guesstimate or best estimate. So China's average annual growth, China's official average annual growth of HIV/AIDS in the past 30 years is about 2%. Let's assume China's total HIV/AIDS patients was 10 million, and with a 2% annual growth from the 1990s. I asked ChatGPT the below question. I said, if China's total HIV/AIDS cases were 10 million in the 1990s, and with a 2% annual growth rate, how many HIV/AIDS cases does China have now? And it gave me a total of 18 million, assuming a 2% average annual growth. Another factor that we should keep in mind is that, excuse me, although Beijing has claimed that national blood collection centers are now under strict scrutiny, there are still unregulated blood collection practices due to the collusion between blood stations and blood traders across China. While the CCP actively covers up the atrocities from the 1990s, they are ineffective in eliminating fraud and malpractices. And if a hospital uses contaminated blood products or blood, it's virtually impossible for patients to seek accountability and justice, as HIV may not show immediate symptoms, and China's legal system, doesn't protect the patient's right. So I think HIV contamination at medical facilities in China is still a health hazard, and the risks are not being reported or even tracked. This adds another layer of complexity to the subject. So the true number of people living with HIV in China remains a state secret. Now let me play you a video combining several internet posts. People talks about a dental practice repackaging used dental tools without disinfection and use them on patients. And so these are the video is a collection of various social media posts to give you an idea of people's reaction to the ongoing outbreak.
看到一位护士分享。
Hold on. Yeah, the first part. This is if you read Chinese, you see that it's actually a voice was reading several online text posts. So they're not from one person, even though you hear one voiceover. They're actually from multiple sources, but they use one voice to read the various posts.
大家一定要洁身自好啊！刷到一位护士分享，作为血浆专护士，温馨提醒大家，艾滋病已经遍地开花，更有部分极端确诊人员，他们还建立了艾滋病传播交流群，每天在群里上报传播了多少人。 我们上大学的时候，才开学，老师就跟我们说学校里有艾滋病人，保护其隐私，不予公开。但是大家做出行为要谨慎。我老公是传染病重症的工作人员，基本上都是艾滋。面对医护人员，他们也不会说实话，甚至会传播伴侣。女方在孕中期才检查出来。姐妹们，我是学口腔的，之前在一个诊所实习。如果你们要拔牙、洗牙之类的，建议还是去医院，因为我待的那个诊所就是患者多了，器械不够，来不及消毒，就假装是新的，给你装袋子里。 拿过来给你用，让你以为是干净的、刚开封的。以后谈恋爱必须体检，一方不同意就拜拜。
现在出现了一个大家最不愿意看到的现象，就是学生集体感染艾滋。艾滋病这个东西越来越低龄化了，这个东西确实很难防。不要说什么乱搞，就是正常谈恋爱，万一碰到是艾滋病，那该怎么预防呢？难道在情浓之时喊停，然后让对方拿出无碍健康证吗？ 实际上，保护艾滋病人隐私是对国民最大的伤害，让更多国民受到艾滋病的风险感染增加。应该明确标志艾滋病患者的身份，让大家有所防范。中国的艾滋病患者数量已达十分严重程度了，妨碍致癌刻不容缓。应该尽快把妨碍列为重大社会危害的首要事件，不要一味的去强调保护个人隐私。
我跟你们说一个，这个视频可能会下架的啊。我有个朋友就在防疫站上班，就所有的女生男生啊，你们都注意点，一定要带好小雨伞。艾滋病是比我们普通人想象的严重10000倍的方式在井喷。2个事儿告诉你，第一呢，就是现在大学生入学一定要做艾滋调查，强制性的，你就知道这个意味着什么吧，有多严重。第二，外国留学生现在进入国内已经不再强制做艾滋检查了。然后。 非洲到中国来留学的留学生是之前的20倍以上，而且现在的年轻人吧，就越来越对这件事情抱着一种开放自由的状态。我还是想跟你们说一句，就是一定要多个心眼儿，一定要自保，别逮着谁，你觉得感觉来了，你以为你自己是那个大女主呢？你可以自由选择。我告诉你，危险就在你身边。
Okay, so there are many videos like this. Online, and people are coming up with various approach to deal with the situation, and they are most concerned with HIV impacting their dating life. So people, one guy gave the idea of taking the zero COVID approach to have everyone in the country being tested for HIV. Anyways, people. I mean, the talk about asking they're either not dating or asking the partner to show proof of health before they go out. So it may sound ridiculous, but in China, I think the reason that people have panicked is related to too many Chinese now have this mentality of taking revenge on society. So in 2021, a Chinese court sentenced a woman, where is she? Yeah. In 2021, a Chinese court sentenced a young woman to 5 years in prison for spreading HIV. This young woman lived an irresponsible life and contracted HIV. To seek revenge against society, she had sex with over 1,000 men in about a year. To attract men at night, she always wore red. And when she was caught, she wore red. Given there are 365 days in a year, on average, she infects 3 men every day. There are HIV patient groups online that discuss and compare notes about how they infect others. Some even sell contaminated blood or blood products. So there are stories like this that got Chinese people really concerned. There was a man with HIV courted a young woman, and after having sex with her, he sent her a gift the next day with a message, "Welcome to the HIV club." So this type of behavior has aggravated people's panic over the outbreak. Now, Chinese culture has always been very conservative in matters concerning romantic relationship, marriage, and sexual activities. Traditionally, sleeping with men who is not your husband or before you are married was unthinkable for Chinese women and their parents. In recent decades, however, the Chinese have become even more open and carefree than people in the West. Extramarital affairs are normal and expected. Chinese women have changed. I saw a video just a couple of days ago showing a group of Chinese women chanting wild chants that are completely sexual in nature at a restaurant. No wonder China's birth rate is so low. Sex is no longer an act of love, but has become a transaction that can be openly traded for money, favor, revenge, pleasure, or whatever people want. Sexual promiscuity has profoundly changed Chinese society in ways people aren't aware. Young men from decent families would rather marry an ordinary-looking woman than a pretty one because he doesn't trust pretty young women. I have a friend who's extremely intelligent and successful. His wife is very ordinary looking, but their relationship is as solid as a rock. A young man's family told me that they don't want a pretty woman as their daughter-in-law. With the popularity of cosmetic surgery, a young woman's beauty can be repulsive to some people. Also, hotels have become a place that has such a bad reputation, as it is the place where promiscuity takes place. It has almost become, I was told, that it could be a synonym for sin. About 20 years ago, I was told by friends from mainland China that well-educated Chinese families don't send their daughters to work in hotels, not even as accountants there. They fear of having bad influence on their daughters. Similarly, parents who care about their reputation don't choose young women working at hotels as wives for their sons. Hotels carry such a negative stigma. I don't know if that's still the case, but this was at least 20 years ago. Over a decade ago, I have an American friend who tried to date a Chinese woman. Because he travels frequently and always arranged their dates at his hotel, their relationship surely didn't go anywhere. Despite his efforts, I don't think he knows to this day why the woman was intense and showed no interest, even though she loves him dearly. So if you want to date a Chinese woman, or if you want to take a Chinese woman on a date, stay away from hotels, or at least in the beginning. Prostitution is also a serious problem in both China and Taiwan. Many of the prostitutes in Taiwan are from mainland China. I was told by a wealthy Taiwanese that wealthy Taiwanese families don't buy their daughters Chanel handbags because young women carrying a Chanel bag in Taiwan are more than likely high-end call girls. To avoid this stigma, they don't give Chanel bags to their daughters. So if you're a pretty young woman, do not bring your Chanel bag to Asia, or you'll be mistaken. These are the things that I don't think the Chinese would tell you. Of course, only people who care about their reputation or have traditional values are concerned with these issues. They are the small minority. Many Chinese in mainland China today do not care and certainly wouldn't have this issue. I don't think the current HIV panic is a bad thing. I think it will force the Chinese to reevaluate everything in life, gain some self-respect, and rediscover the meaning of love and life once again. So I want to end my talk with a video. It was given by a woman who has worked in a cosmetic surgery hospital in China. She gave a very detailed account of her experience with people with HIV at her hospital, and I think her insight is is priceless. So let me play that video.
一年啊，我遇到一个
Sorry, let me start from the beginning. Here we go.
我在整形医院工作了7年啊，我遇到一个最恐怖的事情，任何家庭如果沾上它，必定是灭顶之灾。有一天啊，有一个22岁的女孩子来找我做整形，她要做眼睛做一下调整。那我们医院里面做任何手术之前是会给她做一个4大项传染病的体检，比如说什么甲肝、乙肝，然后那个梅毒、艾滋这种都要体检的。当初呢，我是给她做了一个面诊，给她怎么做设计啊，跟她讲话讲了半天呢，然后才去体检的。体检出来之后，医院直接通知我说她是一个病携带患者。我当时都震惊了，你知道吗？我当时想着我的腿都软了，因为我那个时候在她的脸上摸了半天，我跟她说话说了1个多小时，我都在想她有没有口水喷到我脸上，真的很恐怖。那一天我腿都软了。医院里边的人直接通知了那个疾控中心，疾控中心会给她打电话，让她去疾控中心去报到。当时我就在想，这么漂亮的一个女孩子，她嘛1.7米的身高，皮肤白白的，然后呢这个头发长长的，那你说她以后不谈恋爱了吗？不找男朋友了吗？很多男人都会对她产生想法，是不是？我当时就在想，疾控中心去让她报到之后，会限制她的人身自由吗？后来我了解一下，根本不会，疾控中心不会限制她的人身自由，只会让她定时定期的去报到，报道她的行踪，然后呢还帮助她保护她的隐私，不会告诉任何人。你不觉得这个东西很恐怖吗？我也知道这是人权，这是一种尊重啊。甚至我后来了解到，这种携带患者，他是在这种婚姻做体检的时候检查出来，他都不告诉另一半，你敢相信吗？我都疯了，你知道吗？后来我又到网上去查了一下这个数据，他们说目前的携带患者是150万到200万。后来我在想，他到底是什么得上这样子的一些东西？我觉得也不得而知吧。但是还有另外2个姐姐，就我在整形医院遇到的那2个姐姐，另外2个姐姐都是那个富太太，一个是物流公司的老板，一个是在家里带孩子的宝妈，但是她的老公很能赚钱。后来他们来找我做调整的时候，都查出来他们有那个 M 毒，他们也是携带了这种的病毒之后，医院里有一些还帮他做手术了。医院里边其实是有一个专门的手术间跟手术包，是给这种携带患者来做手术的，你敢相信吗？他会让你去检查那个什么低度，高于多少就不能做，低于多少医院是可以勉为其难接你这个手术的。那个医生会戴几层手套，然后脸上戴眼镜，就怕那个血液溅到他的眼睛里边去。所以我是觉得啊，就是男人爱 PC 这件事情真的是祸害家庭，祸害女人，你知道吗？我还是提倡大家一定要洁身自好。还有就是，如果你的老公有这种 PC 的爱好的话，你说他如果遇到那个22岁的美女怎么办呀？是不是？所以我是觉得，如果你的老公有这样的爱好的话，你们一定要懂得保护自己，让自己不要遭受这样子的无缘无故的这种伤害。
Okay, I don't know about the advice that woman gave at the end, and in which she said that if your husband has that kind of a hobby, you need to protect yourself. I think, I don't think any woman should have that kind of a husband. Anyways, that's all I have for you today. Okay, it's a lot to say. Let's see what people have for me. Excuse me. Okay. Any questions? I'm just scrolling down to the bottom and see if I have any questions. Okay, that seems to be all. Okay, wow. All right. I haven't seen any questions yet. I see a lot of discussions, which is great. Okay. Okay. All right. I don't see any. Oh, here we go. Michelle Barnhill. Lei is meticulous in her research. It dismays the Wu Mao, causing them elevated screeching fits. Oh my goodness. That tells you how important the subject is and how true, right? How important the subject matter is. You could tell, you could judge them by their reaction. Okay. Wow, it's just, I can't seem to get to the bottom of this. Oh my goodness, this is a, oh, here's a question. I'm just trying to see if people, John S. Could COVID vaccines be correlated to the increased HIV rates? It can be. There have been a lot of discussions on that. That's what I purposely stayed away from that subject and try to use data sort of prior to, like, the data I shared was before 2022, right? The latest is 2022. So I think it could be another contributing factor, but it's too complex for us to discuss at this moment. What I want to focus on is the actual, the base of HIV patients in China that has existed since the 1990s, that never went away, that has been covered up by the CCP. And that is a problem. And then on top of that, you have the vaccine. So I'm trying to separate the two causes. I'm trying to focus on the historical problem, or the problem left by the historical scandal, and also the recent change in people's behavior, change in people's sexual behavior. So that's what I try to focus on in this discussion. I'm fully aware of the impact of the vaccines. Shannon Newman. Well, thank you, Shannon, for the support, for the super stickers. Paul Lovecheck. What do people think about Magic Johnson? He has HIV. Unless you are a basketball fan, which not a lot of Chinese are, and unless you are familiar with the NBA, and also Magic Johnson is a little older, right? I mean, he retired a long time ago, so I don't think the younger basketball fans are aware of that. So I do not think a lot of Chinese know about Magic Johnson. Boycott China. Lei, did the CIA and Jesus co-invent AIDS? I do not know. I do not know. I do not know its origin. It will be too big of a subject for me to cover here. But thank you for the suggested ideas. I think people need to, take that into consideration. Thank you, and thank you for the support. All right. Okay, Woodstock. David Lopan asked you a question, and he highlighted your name. Also, it was a COVID-19 pandemic, and I've seen videos about HIV is fake. I mean, caused by the medications given. Okay, yeah, I know there are a lot of people who question the origin of HIV and the role the pandemic has played. I mean, the COVID pandemic has played in HIV. That's a valid concern, but that's not the focus of my talk. I'm not discrediting the claims. What I'm saying is just HIV. I'm just talking about the phenomena and how it's how it has caused serious panic in China. Okay, Dave M. Lei, your 18 million HIV projection, did that account for the mortality rate of HIV? And Happy New Year. I mean, that's just my very, for the fun of it, using AI, because the Chinese model assumed close to 1 million HIV AIDS patients during the 1990 outbreak, right? So it grew from 1 million to 1.3 million now. The active, of course, factoring the mortality rate. So it grew from 1 million to 1.3 million now. So my question is, if the base wasn't 1 million, if the base was 10 million, as the two Chinese doctors estimated, they said tens of millions. And just to be conservative, I use 10 million. So if the base was 10 million in the 1990s, assuming 2% annual rate, what would it be now? It's 18 million. If we apply the same type of math, I mean, as the Chinese official data, it would be at least 13 million, right? It would be at least 10 times of the official data. So no matter what, China's real HIV infections should be 10 times the official number. I guess that's the point. Don't focus on my 18 million. I just did it out of curiosity, purely out of curiosity. Do not quote me on that. But what's important is the two doctors both saying that the amount of infections in China as a result of the outbreak in the 1990s would be in the tens of millions. That's the conclusion that both have reached. And I don't know if anyone, can estimate the numbers as closely as they did. So, well, thank you, Dave. Excuse me. I have this saying, once a financial analyst, always a financial analyst. I'm always fascinated to, play with the numbers and to see what we can come up with. All right. Okay. Here's a question from David Lopan. What degree do you think the problem of intravenous drug use might be an underestimation source of HIV in China? The CCP might be looking at these issues separately on purpose. I know intravenous drug abuse in China is not as big of a problem in China as it is here, because drug abuse is seriously forbidden in China. The CCP understands the risk of drug abuse, so that it's not. I'm sure there are people who practice that, but it's not so easily accessible to the public. So the problem, there are certainly cases, but I don't think it's as serious as the other areas of abuse. Thank you for the question. Okay. All right, that seems to be the end of question. Well, thank you very much for joining me, and I wish you a great rest of the weekend. And I will see you next week, or this week. Bye-bye.